The alarm bells screamed through the corridors of the human ship Endeavor as Captain Jake Morrison rushed to the bridge. His boots echoed on the metal floors while red warning lights flashed all around him. Something was very wrong in this quiet sector of space. "Captain, we're getting a distress signal from the Kaleri colony on Theron Prime," reported Lieutenant Amy Davis from her station. Her fingers moved quickly across the control panels as she tried to clear up the transmission. "It's weak, but they're asking for immediate help." Jake stopped beside her chair and looked at the fuzzy image on the main screen. The Kaleri were a peaceful alien race that looked somewhat like tall, thin humans with blue skin and large eyes. They were known throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology and their complete hatred of violence. They had never hurt anyone in their long history. "How far are we from their planet?" Jake asked. "About 6 hours at maximum speed," answered Lieutenant Commander Pete Rogers from the navigation station. "Should I set course, Captain?" Jake nodded. "Do it. And send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we're responding to a Kaleri distress call." The Endeavor changed direction and jumped to faster-than-light speed. Jake had met the Kaleri before, during trade missions. They were kind people who created beautiful art and amazing technology. They had cities made of crystal that sparkled like diamonds in the sunlight. The thought of them being in danger made his stomach feel heavy. 6 hours later, the ship dropped out of hyperspace near Theron Prime. What Jake saw made his blood run cold. The planet that had once been covered in shining crystal cities was now dark and smoking. Huge chunks of debris floated in space around the world. Ships were burning as they fell through the atmosphere. "My God," whispered Communications Officer Lisa Turner. "What happened here?" Before anyone could answer, dozens of small ships appeared on their sensors. They were moving fast toward the Endeavor, but these weren't warships. They were transport vessels, old and badly damaged, packed with refugees trying to escape the dying planet. "Captain, we're being contacted by one of those refugee ships," Lisa said. "Put them on screen." The face that appeared was clearly Kaleri, but this one looked different from the calm, peaceful aliens, Jake remembered. This one's large eyes were wide with fear, and his blue skin was pale with exhaustion. Burns covered parts of his face, and his voice shook when he spoke. "Human vessel, this is Counselor Vexton of the Kaleri High Council. Please, you must help us. Our world is dying. The Drakmor came 3 days ago. They destroyed everything, everyone." The alien's voice broke, and he looked away from the screen. For a moment, Jake felt anger rising in his chest. The Drakmor Empire was known throughout the galaxy as a group of evil reptilian aliens who conquered peaceful worlds and made slaves of anyone who survived their attacks. They were cruel and powerful, with a huge fleet of warships that could destroy entire star systems. "How many survivors are there?" Jake asked. "Maybe 2 million people escaped in these ships," Vexton replied. "But there were 40 million people on Theron Prime before the attack. The Drakmor killed everyone else or took them as slaves. Captain, we need somewhere safe to go, but more than that, we need help stopping them." Jake turned to his crew. "Pete, how many refugee ships are out there?" "I count about 300, Captain. Most of them are damaged and low on fuel." "They won't make it far?" "Get our medical team ready to help the wounded," Jake ordered. "And contact the nearest Federation outpost. Tell them we need emergency supplies for Kaleri refugees." But even as he gave these orders, Jake knew it wouldn't be enough. The Galactic Federation was made up of peaceful species who solved problems by talking, not fighting. They would send food and medicine, but they wouldn't send soldiers. That wasn't how the galaxy worked. "Captain," Vexton said from the screen, "there is something else. The Drakmor are not stopping with our colony worlds. They are moving toward our home planet, Kalarthan. 3 billion of my people live there. They have no weapons, no way to fight back. The Drakmor will kill them all." Jake felt his hands tighten into fists. "What about the Federation? Won't they help?" "The Kaleri counselors." Face showed only sadness. "The Federation will hold meetings and write angry letters. They will send food and blankets after my people are dead. But they will not fight. Fighting is not civilized, they say. Then what do you want from us? Jake asked, though he was starting. To understand. We have heard stories about your species, Captain Morrison. Old stories from when humans first joined the galaxy. Stories about wars on your homeworld. Stories about how your people fight when others cannot or will not. Vexton looked directly into Jake's eyes. We are asking for your help. Not just supplies or medicine. We are asking your people to fight for us. The bridge became very quiet. Jake's crew looked at each other nervously. Everyone in the galaxy knew that humans were different from other species. While most aliens had given up fighting thousands of years ago, humans had only stopped having wars on Earth a few hundred years ago. Every human still learned about military history in school. They all knew how to fight if they had to. Counselor, Jake said slowly, you're asking us to go to war with the Drakmar Empire. They have 50,000 warships. We have maybe 500. They control 200 star systems. We only have one. Yes, Vexton replied simply. That is what we are asking. Jake looked at his crew again. He saw the same expression on all their faces that he felt in his own heart. It was crazy. It was impossible. It would probably mean the end of humanity as a spacefaring species. But it was also the right thing to do. I'll take your request to Earth, Jake said finally. I can't promise anything, but I'll make sure our leaders hear what you're asking. Thank you, Captain. That is all we can ask for. As the transmission ended, Jake stood alone on his bridge while his crew worked to help the refugee ships. He thought about the crystal cities he had seen reduced to rubble. He thought about the 3 billion Kaleri waiting helplessly on their homeworld while an army of killers moved toward them. He thought about the Federation's endless meetings and useless letters. Most of all, he thought about what his grandfather had told him about the old wars on Earth. Sometimes, son, the old man had said, someone has to stand up and fight. Not because they want to, but because nobody else will. Jake walked to the communication station. Lisa, send a priority message to Earth Command. Tell them we need to speak with the Defense Council immediately. Tell them it's about the Kaleri situation and that it's urgent. Yes, Captain. What should I tell them the meeting is about? Jake looked out at the burning planet one more time. Tell them it's about going to war. As the message raced toward Earth at light speed, Jake Morrison didn't know that his simple report would soon change the galaxy forever. He didn't know that within days, every human ship in space would be preparing for the biggest war in galactic history. He only knew that someone had asked for help, and humans had never been good at saying no to people in need. The Kaleri had pleaded for aid. Soon, humanity would answer with something the galaxy had never seen before. The message from Captain Jake Morrison reached Earth 3 days later. Fleet Admiral Kate Sullivan was eating breakfast in her office when her assistant knocked on the door with an urgent communication pad. She read the report twice before putting down her coffee cup and calling for an emergency meeting. Within 2 hours, the most powerful people in Earth's government sat around a large table in the underground war room beneath Geneva. The room had been built during the last Earth War over a century ago, but it had never been used for something this important. President Helen Murphy sat at the head of the table, her face serious as she listened to Admiral Sullivan read Jake's report out loud. So let me understand this correctly, said Defense Minister Paul Clark when the Admiral finished. The Kaleri want us to fight the entire Drakmar Empire to save their people. That's right, Admiral Sullivan replied. And according to our intelligence, the Drakmar have about 50,000 warships compared to our 500. General Ryan Brooks, the head of Earth's Marine Corps, leaned forward in his chair. He was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from old battles. The numbers don't look good, but numbers aren't everything. What do we know about how the Drakmar fight? Colonel Amy Rodriguez opened a folder full of pictures and documents. She was the head of human intelligence and knew more about alien military forces than anyone else on Earth. The Drakmar fight like most galactic species. They line up their ships in neat formations and shoot at each other until one side gives up. They follow the old rules of war that the galaxy has used for thousands of years. What kind of rules? Asked President Murphy. Well, for example, they don't attack medical ships or civilian targets. They don't fight at night because it's considered unfair. They always warn their enemies before attacking so both sides can prepare. When one side is clearly losing, they surrender and the winning side treats them well. Amy paused and looked around the table. They fight like gentlemen. General. Brooks laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Gentlemen don't win wars, soldiers do. Exactly, Amy continued. The Drakmor have never fought an enemy that uses human military tactics. They don't know about surprise attacks, guerrilla warfare, or psychological operations. They've never faced an enemy that fights harder when they're losing. President Murphy rubbed her temples. She had been elected to keep Earth peaceful and prosperous, not to start the biggest war in galactic history. What would happen if we said no to the Kalari request? The Drakmor would kill or enslave every Kalari in the galaxy, Admiral Sullivan said simply. 3 billion people would die, and the Drakmor Empire would become even stronger. Eventually, they might decide to come for us, and if we say yes, we might save the Kalari, but we could lose everything. If we fail, the Drakmor will probably destroy Earth as an example to other species who might think about fighting them. The room became quiet. Everyone knew that this decision would affect not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. Finally, General Brooks spoke up. Ma'am, I've been a soldier for 40 years. I've studied every war in human history. I know that fighting the Drakmor Empire sounds impossible, but I also know something else. Humans don't fight wars the way other species do. We don't give up when the odds are bad. We get angry and we fight harder. Go on, President Murphy said. The Drakmor think they're superior because they have more ships and better technology. But they've never faced an enemy that will do anything to win. They've never fought humans, who are protecting innocent people. That gives us advantages that don't show up in their computer calculations. Colonel Rodriguez nodded. I agree with General Brooks. Our intelligence shows that the Drakmor are confident and maybe even careless. They expect their enemies to fight fair and surrender when the battle turns against them. They don't understand that humans will keep fighting even when defeat seems certain. Admiral Sullivan stood up and walked to a large screen on the wall. She pressed a button and a map of the galaxy appeared, showing human space as a small blue dot and the Drakmor Empire as a huge red area. If we decide to help the Kalari, we would need to move fast, she said. The Drakmor are already moving toward the Kalari homeworld. We have maybe 2 months before they attack it. That's not enough time to build more ships, so we'll have to use what we have. How many ships can we put together? Asked the President. Every combat vessel we have. About 500 warships, plus support ships and transports. We'd be committing our entire fleet to this operation. What about Earth's defenses? We'd have to leave Earth protected by only a few patrol boats and the orbital defense platforms. If we lose this war, Earth would be helpless. President Murphy looked around the table at her advisors. These were good people who had spent their lives serving humanity. Now she was asking them to risk everything for strangers they had never met. What does everyone think? She asked. Secretary of State Karen White was the first to speak. From a diplomatic standpoint, this is very dangerous. If we attack the Drakmor Empire, we'll be breaking dozens of galactic treaties. The Federation might kick us out or even support the Drakmor against us. But if we don't help, said General Brooks, every species in the galaxy will know that humans talk tough but won't fight when it matters. That could make us targets for every bully in space. Admiral Sullivan added, there's also the military consideration. If we wait and let the Drakmor get stronger, they might come for us anyway. It might be better to fight them now while we have allies. What allies? Asked President Murphy. The Kalari have very advanced technology, even if they won't use it. For weapons, they could help us in other ways. And there are probably other species in the galaxy who hate the Drakmor, but are too afraid to fight them. If we show that the Drakmor can be beaten, others might join us. Colonel Rodriguez opened another folder. I've been studying the Drakmor military structure. They're used to fighting species that surrender quickly. Their whole system is built around fast victories and easy conquests. A long war would be very difficult for them. You think we could win? President Murphy asked. I think we could make them pay a price they're not willing to pay. The Drakmor are bullies, and bullies usually back down when someone hits them hard. Enough. President Murphy stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the lights of Geneva and the peaceful countryside beyond. Earth had been at peace for over a century. People lived good lives, had families, and didn't worry about wars or enemies. This decision could end all of that. But she also thought about the Kaleri refugees that Captain Morrison had described. She thought about the 3 billion innocent people waiting on their homeworld for death to come from space. She thought about what her grandfather had told her about the old wars on Earth when people fought against impossible odds because it was the right thing to do. I've made my decision, she said, turning back to face the table. We're going to help the Kaleri. The room erupted in activity as everyone began talking at once. Admiral Sullivan was already making notes about ship deployments. General Brooks was planning ground operations. Colonel Rodriguez was thinking about intelligence gathering. Admiral Sullivan, President Murphy said loudly, getting everyone's attention. You are now in command of Operation Righteous Fury. You have every ship, every soldier, and every resource that Earth can provide. Your mission is to stop the Drakmor Empire and save the Kaleri people. Yes, ma'am, Admiral Sullivan replied. When do we leave? As soon as possible. Send a message to Captain Morrison. Tell him that humanity is coming to help. As the meeting broke up and people rushed to their duties, President Murphy sat alone in the war room. She had just committed her entire species to a war they might not survive. But she also knew that if humanity wouldn't fight for innocent people who had no one else to turn to, then they didn't deserve to survive. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone asked humans for help. The human fleet moved through space like a pack of wolves hunting in the darkness. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship, the U.S. Defiance, watching the stars streak by as they traveled toward their first battle. Behind her followed every warship that Earth could spare, 500 vessels carrying humanity's best soldiers into the unknown. It had been 3 weeks since President Murphy gave the order to help the Kaleri. 3 weeks of frantic preparation, loading supplies, and saying goodbye to families who might never see their loved ones again. Now they were finally here, at the edge of Kaleri space, ready to face an enemy that outnumbered them 100 to 1. Admiral, we're approaching the Zarian system, reported Navigation Officer Tim Johnson. The Kaleri mining station there sent a distress signal 12 hours ago. Kate nodded. Zarian was a small world where the Kaleri mined the rare crystals they used in their technology. Intelligence reports said that a Drakmor fleet was heading there to capture the mines. It would be the perfect place for humanity's first battle. How many enemy ships? She asked. Our scouts report about 300 Drakmor vessels approaching the planet, answered Intelligence Officer Sandra Bell. They should arrive in about 6 hours, Kate smiled grimly. 300 ships against her 50. Most alien commanders would consider those impossible odds in retreat. But Kate had studied human military history since she was a child. She knew that humans had won battles against worse odds than this. Send a message to all ship captains, she ordered. We're going to show these reptiles how humans fight. On the destroyer UHS Ranger, Captain Alex Turner was preparing his fighter squadron for their first combat mission. The young pilots around him looked nervous but determined. They had trained for this moment their entire careers, but none of them had ever fought in a real war. Listen up, Alex said to his pilots. The Drakmor think they're going to have an easy victory today. They think we'll line up our ships and trade shots like gentlemen. They're wrong. He pointed to a display showing the enemy fleet formation. See how they're arranged in neat rows? That's how galactic warfare has been fought for thousands of years. Both sides line up, shoot at each other, and whoever has more ships wins. But we're not going to play by their rules. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez raised her hand. What's the plan, Captain? We're going to hit them fast and hard before they know what's happening. No warning, no challenge, no fair fight. We're going to strike like lightning and disappear before they can respond." The pilots looked at each other uncertainly. This wasn't how they had been taught warfare worked in the galaxy. But Alex had studied ancient Earth naval battles, and he knew that surprise attacks had won more wars than superior numbers. Meanwhile, on the heavy cruiser UHS Thunderbolt, Major Beth Collins was briefing her boarding team. These were the toughest soldiers in the human fleet, trained to fight hand-to-hand in the cramped corridors of enemy ships. Most galactic species had forgotten how to fight without weapons, but humans remembered. "The Drakmor are bigger and stronger than us," Beth told her troops, "but they've never fought an enemy that won't give up. They expect their enemies to surrender when the battle turns against them. When they realize we're not going to quit, they'll panic." Sergeant Don Murphy, a veteran of the asteroid mining conflict, stepped forward. "Ma'am, what if they tried to surrender to us?" "Then we accept their surrender and treat them well," Beth replied. "We're not monsters. But we fight until they surrender. Not until it's convenient for us." As the human fleet approached Zarian, the Drakmor commander War Captain Nexver was studying reports from his scouts. The reptilian officer had conquered 17 worlds in his career and had never lost a battle. He expected this to be another easy victory. "War Captain," reported his intelligence officer, "the humans have arrived at Zarian. They have about 50 ships." Nexver hissed with amusement. 50 ships against our 300? Are they insane?" "Perhaps. They don't understand the odds, War Captain. The human species is new to galactic warfare. Then we'll teach them how civilized species conduct war. Signal the fleet to form battle lines. We'll give them a chance to surrender before we destroy them." But the humans had no intention of forming battle lines. As the Drakmor fleet approached Zarian in their traditional formation, Admiral Sullivan's ships scattered across the system like seeds in the wind. Some hid behind asteroids, others powered down their engines and drifted like space debris. The largest group took position near Zarian's moon, using the planet's gravity to mask their movements. "Admiral," reported Communications Officer Lisa, "Ford, the Drakmor are trying to contact us. They're demanding we surrender." "Ignore them," Kate replied. "Let them wonder what we're doing." The Drakmor fleet continued toward Zarian, expecting the humans to either flee or form up for a traditional battle. Instead, they found nothing but empty space. War Captain Nexver began to feel uneasy as his sensors showed human ships scattered throughout the system in no pattern he could understand. "What are they doing?" he asked his tactical officer. "Unknown, War Captain. This formation makes no sense according to standard galactic warfare doctrine." That's when the humans struck. Captain Alex Turner led his fighter squadron in a devastating attack on the Drakmor rear guard. His pilots screamed out of the asteroid field like ancient Earth fighter planes, their weapons blazing. But instead of trying to destroy the enemy ships, they targeted engines and weapon systems. "Remember," Alex called over the radio, "we're not trying to kill them all. We're trying to cripple them so they can't fight back." The Drakmor had never seen anything like it. Enemy fighters that attacked from multiple directions at once, ignoring the traditional rules of engagement. Several reptilian ships found their engines destroyed before they could even turn to face their attackers. At the same time, Admiral Sullivan's main force attacked from behind Zarian's moon. Her ships moved in small groups, each one targeting a different part of the enemy formation. The Drakmor tried to respond, but their neat battle lines became chaos as human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts. "All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan," Kate broadcast to her fleet. "Execute boarding maneuvers." This was something the galaxy had never seen. While the Drakmor were still trying to figure out where the human ships were, Major Beth Collins and her boarding teams were already cutting through their hulls with plasma torches. The reptilian crews had no idea how to fight enemies who were. Suddenly, inside their own ships, the fighting in the corridors was brutal and short. The Drakmor were strong and had sharp claws, but they had never faced humans who fought with knives and bare hands. Most galactic species surrendered when faced with hand-to-hand combat, but humans seemed to enjoy it. "Bridge secure," Beth reported as her team captured the Drakmor cruiser Conquest of Worlds. The enemy commander wants to surrender. Accepted, Admiral Sullivan replied. Take him prisoner and secure any intelligence materials. Across the battlefield, similar scenes were playing out. Human ships appeared from nowhere, struck hard, and vanished before the enemy could respond. Drakmor vessels found themselves boarded by soldiers, who fought with a ferocity that terrified the reptilian crews. War Captain Vexver watched his orderly battle turn into a nightmare. His ships were being picked apart by an enemy that refused to fight fair. Explosions lit up the darkness as human fighters swarmed around his vessels like angry insects. War Captain, his communications officer reported, we're receiving surrender requests from 12 of our ships. The humans are inside. Them, impossible, Vexver hissed. How did they get through our shields? They didn't, sir. They cut through the hulls and entered through the holes. For the first time in his career, Vexver felt fear. These humans weren't fighting like civilized beings. They were fighting like wild animals with no regard for the proper rules of war. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Full retreat. We need to report this to High Command. But retreating from humans was easier said than done. As the Drakmor ships tried to escape, they found human fighters chasing them, attacking their engines and weapons. Several reptilian vessels were forced to surrender when they could no longer maneuver. When the battle was over, the humans had captured or destroyed 60 Drakmor ships while losing only 3 of their own. But more importantly, they had sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. Admiral, reported Communications Officer Ford, we're getting messages from all over this sector. Other species want to know how we defeated the Drakmor so easily. Kate smiled as she looked at the captured enemy ships floating in space around them. Tell them that humans don't fight fair, we fight to win. The news of the Battle of Zarian spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The mighty Drakmor Empire, which had conquered hundreds of worlds, had been defeated by a small human fleet. More importantly, the humans had shown that the Drakmor could be beaten on distant worlds. Enslaved species began to whisper about the humans who fought without mercy and won without superior numbers. The galaxy was beginning to realize that something new had entered the game of war, something that didn't follow the old rules. War Captain Vexver's report to the Drakmor High Command was brief and terrifying. The humans are not like other species. Emperor Zakthul of the Drakmor Empire slammed his clawed fist on the command table as he read the reports from Zarian. The massive reptilian ruler stood nearly 8 feet tall, with dark green scales and eyes that burned like red coals. He had ruled the empire for 30 years and had never faced a defeat like this. 300 ships defeated by 50 human vessels, he hissed to his war council. How is this possible? War Master Grekstock, the Empire's top military commander, shifted nervously in his chair. My Emperor, the humans fight unlike any species we have encountered. They ignore all the civilized rules of warfare. They attack without warning, board our ships like pirates, and refuse to surrender even when facing certain death. Then we will teach them the price of defying the Empire, Zakthul growled. Assemble the Grand Fleet. I want every available warship moved to the Kaleri home system. We will crush these humans and make an example of them that will terrify the galaxy. Within days, the largest military force in galactic history began moving toward Kalarthan, the Kaleri homeworld. 1,000 Drakmor warships, including the Emperor's massive flagship Eternal Dominion, prepared for what would become known as the Battle of Kalarthan. Meanwhile, Admiral Kate Sullivan was meeting with Kaleri High Counselor Vexthan on the Crystal World itself. The Kaleri leader looked much better than when she had first seen him as a refugee, but worry still filled his large eyes. Admiral, our sensors show the Drakmor Grand Fleet approaching, Vexthan said. They will be here in 2 days. You have perhaps 200 ships now with the reinforcements from Earth. How can you possibly face 1,000 enemy vessels? Kate looked out the window at the beautiful crystal spires of the Kaleri capital city. 3 billion innocent people lived on this world, and they were counting on her to save them. The odds were impossible, but she had not come this far to give up now. Counselor, my people have a saying. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. The Drakmor may have more ships, but they've never fought humans who are protecting something they care about. On the planet's surface, Colonel Peter Johnson was preparing the first human ground assault in galactic history. The Kaleri had no soldiers, but they had offered to help in any way they could. Peter was training groups of young Kaleri to carry supplies and provide medical aid to wounded humans. The Drakmor will try to land troops on the planet, Peter explained to his officers. We need to be ready for urban fighting in these crystal cities. The enemy will have superior numbers, but they've never fought in close quarters against humans. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos nodded as she studied maps of the capital city. Sir, the Kaleri buildings are made of crystal and metal. Perfect for setting up defensive positions. We can turn every street corner into a killing zone. Remember, Peter said, we're not just fighting for ourselves. These people asked for our help because they had nowhere else to turn. We're not going to let them down. As the human fleet prepared for battle, Commander Sarah Blake was working on something that had never been tried before in galactic warfare. She was converting old cargo ships into what humans called ghost fleets, unmanned vessels packed with explosives and programmed to ram into enemy ships. It's not pretty, Sarah explained to Admiral Sullivan, but it might give us the edge. The Drakmor won't expect ships with no crews aboard to attack them. How many can you prepare? Kate asked. About 50 ships. They won't be very maneuverable, but they'll do a lot of damage if they hit their targets. 2 days later, the Drakmor Grand Fleet arrived at Kalarthon. Emperor Zakthal stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the beautiful crystal world that would soon be his newest conquest. The human fleet waited between his ships and the planet, looking tiny compared to his massive armada. Signal the humans, Zakthal ordered. Offer them one chance to surrender. If they refuse, we destroy them all. Admiral Sullivan received the Emperor's message on the bridge of the Defiance. The reptilian ruler appeared on her screen, his red eyes burning with hatred. Human Admiral, Zakthal hissed, you are outnumbered 5-1. Surrender now, and I will allow your species to live as slaves. Refuse, and I will hunt down every human in the galaxy. Kate looked at the Emperor with steady eyes. Your Majesty, I have a message for you from the people of Earth. We don't surrender, we don't run away, and we don't let bullies hurt innocent people. If you want this world, you'll have to go through us. So be it, the Emperor snarled. Attack! The Battle of Kalarthon began unlike any space battle in galactic history. Instead of forming neat battle lines, the human ships scattered in all directions like leaves in a storm. The Drakmor tried to follow standard battle tactics, but their organized formations became chaos as human vessels attacked from every angle. Captain Tom Mitchell led a squadron of heavy cruisers in a direct assault on the Emperor's flagship. His ships ignored the smaller enemy vessels and charged straight at the Eternal Dominion, their weapons blazing. All power to forward shields, Tom ordered. We're going to ram that ship if we have to. The sight of human ships charging directly at the enemy flagship shocked the Drakmor crews. Most galactic species tried to avoid damaging the enemy commander's ship, because capturing enemy leaders alive was considered more civilized than killing them, but humans didn't fight to be civilized. They fought to win. As Tom's ships closed with the flagship, Commander Sarah Blake's Ghost Fleet struck the Drakmor rear guard. 50 unmanned cargo ships, guided by simple computer programs, rammed into enemy vessels at maximum speed. The explosions lit up space like a string of deadly fireworks. By the void, whispered War Master Grexstock as he watched his ships being destroyed by vessels with no crews aboard. They're using suicide ships. What kind of species does this? Emperor Zakthal watched in growing horror as his perfect battle plan fell apart. The humans weren't following any known military doctrine. They attacked from impossible angles, used tactics that made no sense, and seemed to have no fear of death. On the planet below, Colonel Peter Johnson's ground forces were engaged in brutal fighting with Drakmor landing parties. The reptilian soldiers were strong and well-armed, but they had never fought in the narrow streets of a crystal city against humans who knew every hiding place. Sniper teams, take out their officers, Peter ordered over the radio. Machine gun nests, wait until they're in the kill zone before opening fire. And remember, we're fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. The urban warfare was unlike anything the Drakmar had ever experienced. Human soldiers appeared from crystal buildings, struck hard, and vanished before the enemy could respond. Every street became a battlefield, every building a fortress. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos led her troops in a desperate defense of the Kaleri government center. The crystal building was surrounded by enemy soldiers, but the humans refused to give up. They keep coming, reported Sergeant Bill Turner. We're running low on ammunition. Then we'll fight with knives, Maria replied. The Kaleri are counting. On us, we don't quit. In space, the battle raged for hours. The Drakmar had superior numbers and technology, but the humans had something that couldn't be measured by computers. The will to fight against impossible odds. Captain Alex Turner's fighter squadron had been in combat for 6 straight hours, but they continued to attack enemy ships with desperate courage. Many of his pilots had been shot down, but the survivors kept fighting. This is Turner to all fighters, Alex called over the radio. We're not going to let these reptiles hurt innocent people. Stay with me and keep fighting. As the battle continued, something unexpected began to happen. The Drakmar crews, who had always been confident in their superior numbers, started to panic. They had never fought an enemy that refused to give up, refused to follow the rules, and seemed to get stronger as the battle turned against them. My Emperor, War Master Grexstock reported, we're losing ships faster than expected. The humans are using tactics we've never seen before. Their suicide attacks and boarding actions are devastating our formations. Emperor Zachthl felt something he had never experienced before, doubt. His grand fleet was supposed to crush the humans easily, but instead he was watching his ships being destroyed by an enemy that fought like wild animals. Then Captain Tom Mitchell achieved the impossible. His damaged cruiser, the UHS Wolverine, managed to ram through the flagship's defenses and collide with the Eternal Dominion. The impact sent both ships spinning through space, badly damaged but still fighting. Boarding teams, go, Tom ordered, as his soldiers prepared to enter the enemy flagship. Find the Emperor and capture him alive. The idea of enemy soldiers boarding the Imperial flagship was so shocking that several Drakmar ships actually stopped fighting to watch. No one in galactic history had ever dared to attack an Emperor's ship directly as human Marines fought their way through the corridors of the Eternal Dominion. The tide of battle began to turn. The Drakmar crews, seeing their Emperor's ship under attack, started to lose their will to fight. Sir, reported Communications Officer Lisa Ford to Admiral Sullivan, we're getting surrender signals from enemy ships throughout the fleet. The boarding of the flagship has broken their morale. The war room on Earth was silent as President Helen Murphy watched the final battle reports from Kalarthon. Admiral Kate Sullivan's voice came through the communication system, tired but victorious. Madam President, the Drakmar Empire has surrendered. Emperor Zachthl is our prisoner, and their remaining fleets are laying down their weapons across the galaxy. The Kaleri are safe. Helen closed her eyes and felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. They had done it. Against impossible odds, humanity had defeated the most powerful empire in the galaxy, but the cost had been terrible. What are our losses, Admiral? Helen asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. We lost over half our fleet, Madam President. 300 ships destroyed, 60,000 personnel killed or missing, but we accomplished our mission. The Kaleri people are alive and free. On Kalarthon, the Crystal City sparkled in the sunlight as millions of Kaleri people celebrated. In the streets, High Counselor Vexthan stood beside Admiral Sullivan on the steps of the government building, tears streaming down his blue face. Admiral Sullivan, he said, my people owe humanity a debt that can never be repaid. You came when no one else would. You fought when victory seemed impossible. You saved us all. Kate looked out at the celebrating crowds and the human soldiers, who stood among them, exhausted but proud. Counselor, we didn't do this for payment or gratitude. We did it because it was right. In the capital city's medical center, Colonel Peter Johnson was visiting wounded soldiers from the ground fighting. The urban warfare had been brutal, and many good people had been hurt defending the Calais civilians. Peter stopped beside the bed of Sergeant Bill Turner, who had lost his left arm in the final battle. "How are you feeling, Sergeant?" Peter asked of Bill. Smiled weakly. "Like hell, sir, but it was worth it. Did you see those Calais kids when we told them they were safe? Made all the fighting worth it." Across the galaxy, the news of humanity's victory spread like wildfire. On 100 worlds that had been conquered by the Drakmar Empire, enslaved species began to rebel. The humans had shown that the reptilian tyrants could be defeated, and hope returned to places that had known only despair for decades. On the former Drakmar world of Nexus 7, the blue-skinned Zephyrians rose up against their reptilian masters. Commander Lisa Ford, leading a small human fleet, arrived just in time to help them win their freedom. "This is Commander Ford to all Zephyrian forces," she broadcast. "Humanity stands with all people who fight for their freedom. We're here to help." The Zephyrian leader, a tall female named Kiraseth, appeared on Lisa's screen with tears of joy in her eyes. "Commander, we have waited 50 years for this day. The humans have given us hope again." Similar scenes played out across dozens of star systems. The vast Drakmar Empire, which had seemed so powerful and permanent, crumbled like a house of cards. Without their emperor and their grand fleet, the remaining Drakmar forces surrendered, or fled to the outer rim of the galaxy, but the victory came with a price that weighed heavily on every human heart. On Earth, in a ceremony broadcast to the entire galaxy, President Murphy read the names of the fallen. The list went on for hours. 60,000 men and women who had died far from home to save people they had never met. Captain Jake Morrison, the president read, killed in action during the final assault on the Eternal Dominion. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez shot down defending Calarthon. Major Beth Collins died leading a boarding action against impossible odds. In the audience, families wept for sons and daughters, husbands and wives, mothers and fathers who would never come home. The price of victory had been paid in human blood, and everyone felt the weight of that sacrifice. 3 months after the war ended, representatives from across the galaxy gathered on Earth for the signing of the Galactic Peace Accords. Species that had been enemies or strangers now sat together as allies, united by their shared experience of human courage. The Calais delegation, led by High Counselor Vexthan, brought with them the most advanced technology their species had. Ever created medical devices that could heal wounds thought permanent, energy systems that could power entire worlds, and defensive shields that could protect planets from attack. "This is our gift to humanity," Vexthan announced. "You gave us our lives. We give you the tools to protect all innocent people in the galaxy." But it wasn't just the Calais who wanted to honor humanity. The Zephyrians offered their knowledge of stellar navigation. The rock-like granite people provided rare minerals needed for building starships. Dozens of species came forward with gifts and offers of alliance. Emperor Zaxthal, now a prisoner on Earth, watched the ceremony from his cell. The proud reptilian ruler had been broken by his defeat, unable to understand how his mighty empire had been destroyed by such a small force. "How did you do it?" he asked Captain Tom Mitchell during one of their meetings. "My fleet was 5 times larger than yours. My soldiers were better armed. My ships were more advanced. How did you possibly win?" Tom looked at the fallen emperor with something that might have been pity. "Your Majesty, you made one mistake. You thought this was about ships and weapons and technology, but it wasn't. It was about people who needed help and people who were willing to help them. You can't calculate that in a computer." "But the cost," Zaxthal said. "So many of your people died. How can you call that victory?" "Because the people we saved are alive," Tom replied. "Because children who would have been slaves are free. Because the galaxy is a better place than it was before. That's worth any price." As the years passed, humanity's role in the galaxy changed completely. No longer were they the newcomers trying to find their place among ancient civilizations. They had become the guardians, the people other species called when evil threatened the innocent. Admiral Sullivan, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and head of the new Galactic Defense Force, established military academies on a dozen worlds. Young people from every species came to learn human military tactics and, more importantly, human values about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. War is not about glory or conquest, she would tell her students. War is about protecting people who deserve to live in peace. Fight only when you must, but when you do fight, fight to win. The Human Defense Pact grew to include over 200 species. Each member contributed what they could: technology, resources, or soldiers, but all understood that humanity would lead when military action was needed. The galaxy had learned that humans were uniquely suited for war, not because they enjoyed violence, but because they hated injustice. On the 10th anniversary of the Battle of Calarthan, President Murphy, now an old woman, gave a speech that was broadcast to every world in human space. 10 years ago, the Kaleri came to us with an impossible request. They asked us to fight an enemy we couldn't defeat, to save people we had never met, to risk everything for strangers who had nowhere else to turn. We said yes because that's who we are. That's who we will always be. Today, the galaxy is at peace because good people were willing to fight for what was right. The Drakamor Empire is gone, replaced by free republics where all species live as equals. The Kaleri children play safely in their crystal cities. Former slaves now rule their own worlds. But we must never forget the price of this peace. 60,000 humans died to make this possible. They gave their lives so that others could live in freedom. Their sacrifice reminds us that peace is not free, it must be earned and protected by those brave enough to stand up to evil. She paused and looked directly into the camera, her voice strong despite her age. To any species that might threaten the innocent, to any empire that dreams of conquest, to any tyrant who believes might makes right, I have a simple message. Humanity is watching, we are ready, and we will answer when good people call for help. Across the galaxy, on worlds both human and alien, people listened to those words and felt safe. They knew that somewhere among the stars, the children of Earth stood ready to fight for anyone who needed help. The Kaleri had pleaded for aid, and humanity had answered with relentless war. In doing so, they had not just saved one species. They had changed the galaxy forever, proving that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from conquest, but from the courage to help others when no one else will. The war was over, but the watch continued, and the galaxy slept peacefully, knowing that humanity stood guard.